Welcome back, Liches. Today our topic is one of great importance. As you can see, we have a DM screen in front of us.
One of the most powerful tools in all of tabletop role-playing. Feel its power flowing within me. Deep within my loins, Kmo. The loins burn.
It really fractures my bones that anytime we start talking about DM screens, the next conversation is a debate about fudging dice. Wolf, what is fudging a dice roll?
I'm glad you asked, Kmo. Fudging a dice roll is the act of the dungeon master rolling a die behind the screen and then lying about the results.
Through their teeth.
Either in favor of themselves or in favor of the characters. And that is fudging a die roll.
Very good, thank you. It really hurts me that the stigma behind this assumes that if you are using a Dungeon Master's screen, you're fudging dice rolls behind here. And if you're not, it means you're an honest Dungeon Master player and you roll out in front of the group. And that there's no in between, it's either or.
Only Siths speak in absolutes.
This is an entirely terrifying misconception that we will hopefully shed some light on today, because the DM screen is a much more powerful tool than you could ever imagine.
Before we dive into all that, we're going to take a little history lesson. We're going to hop on the Magic School Bus back to like the 1970s, where your boys Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, the pioneers, the creators of Dungeons & Dragons, use Dungeon Master screens a little bit different. You know what they did, Kmo?
What do they do?
They sat behind a life-size, Gary Gygax-sized DM screen, and they narrated everything like they were the goddamn Wizard of Oz.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
I believe the purpose of this was that, and it was common, this is what a lot of people did in the 70s, was that the Dungeon Master was almost supposed to be like an omnipotent god.
Narration voice.
This narration, this omnipotent, all-powerful being that was neutral in all of their storytelling and all of their rules and rulings, and they could be switching things behind there, and nobody would have any idea what was happening. The ultimate magician's trick. I love it. Before I die, before I go out, I am 100% going to be DMing like this. Obviously, it's kind of funny to think about this now, but there was a purpose for that. There was sort of this mystique and power with the Dungeon Master's screen that we think has sort of been lost over the years.
Or veiling the storyteller.
The advantage of having a Dungeon Master screen is that it acts as a barrier of power that separates the Dungeon Master from the players.
It really is the division of roles. As a Dungeon Master and your players, you should be on equal terms of genuine human respect at the table. It is the Dungeon Master's job to respect the players and give them equal opportunity and chance at telling their story. It is the player's responsibility to give the Dungeon Master the respect to make those decisions, basically giving authority over to the Dungeon Master. One way to make that clear division at all times subconsciously is to have this. So what does a Dungeon Master hide behind their screen? They will hide notes for their campaign, monster stats. They might be hiding some images, monster initiative tracking. Without a DM screen, a Dungeon Master is going to have all this at a table, and if they're at a small table and players are nearby, even the most trustworthy player is going to have a hard time with wandering eyes. If something is just there, sitting face up, that's an image of a creature that's coming into the campaign later, you might just catch a glimpse of it without meaning to. Like, I know that people are going to say, oh, I would never, ever do that. There's a 100% level of trust at our table, and that's why we don't use the screen, we throw it away. I keep notes that are large text and in bold, and someone sitting on the side of me is definitely going to catch a title. Mm-hmm. If the immersion is ruined for them, it's going to start affecting the other players. You might be hiding a dice tray back here, and some earlier novice DMs, as you're trying to learn this system, you might be fudging dice, but we're going to get to dice and rolling and fudging in a bit. The DM screen is also good space management. We have a ton of things on the table. Now we have a vertical playing field to attach things to. And because this field is vertical, we are going to be able to keep the attention of our players. Because if we don't have this vertical space and we're looking for most of our notes down here, down flat, our attention is not up. And when players start to notice that the Dungeon Master is doing something on their own, they will go on their phones. They will start conversations with their other friends. A lot of your notes for the campaign are here. You're looking at a quarter level, your eyes are up and near the table. They're not going to be tempted to go on their phones, start new conversations. You're still within the mix. Your attention is here. Also, like we stated before, this history behind this. It's about tradition. There's a reason why this thing is up. It's worked so well in the past to help the Dungeon Master create this story and feel of the illusion of the players and fate and chance affecting the world and not the Dungeon Master.
Also, Dungeon Master screens have a bunch of information printed on them because these games are incredibly dense with lots and lots of little rules that you're going to forget. Not every DM screen is going to be 100% useful. You can have sticky notes on there. You can have clipped on initiative things. So you don't have to go opening up your player's handbook or your Dungeon Master's guide. It's good to have those books nearby, but not referencing them and bringing your game to a screeching halt is one of the beauties of having a Dungeon Master screen and having what you think you're going to need for that session tucked away neatly behind this little lovely screen.
Let's bring it up. Let's talk about it. Rolling. The only time that the DM screen is mentioned in any source book is in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it only comes up when they're talking about rolls and about fudging dice specifically. It's using that terminology in there.
So let's talk about fudge and roll. Because that's what y'all want to hear, right? If you're a new Dungeon Master, you're going to feel the need to fudge dice rolls. I've done it in the past. When I first started, I feel like almost every Dungeon Master does it. You panic, you roll 2 crits in a row, you're going to kill somebody, you don't want to have a TPK happen or something, you start fudging dice. It just happens.
Later on, you learn it's more about asking for the right calls rather than needing to fudge dice after.
But that's a skill you're going to learn. For me, the dice gods do not lie. I love to use dice, and I know Kmo does, to help tell your story. And Dungeon Masters are kind of like wild horses. Trying to tame the dice and have them do your bidding for you, fudging them, it's going to lead to ruin. If your players find out that you're fudging your dice rolls, people are not going to respect you as a Dungeon Master. They're going to be like, why are we playing this game if none of what we do actually matters? They're like, every single combat comes down to the skin of our teeth. How can that be? How can it never be that they wipe the floor with us or we kick its ass?
Yeah, you've got to have those combats where the player's just like, blah, blah, like killing things left and right and like, oh, that was easy for them. Like, doesn't matter, but they feel so great doing that.
They feel amazing when they destroy some of your stuff.
Let them have it. The dice will tell that story. It happens.
Only when you freely give into emergent storytelling will you truly understand the power of the Dungeon Master screen and how amazing it is to roll your dice in front of it for combat. Because at that point, the dice are now telling the story. Mm-hmm. It is not you. You did not cause the ogre to crit. The dice did. Your players are going to blame the dice. They're not going to blame you. You can say, this is what happened. You know what? And at that point, it's up to your players to start being smarter. You're putting them in dangerous situations that you normally wouldn't have. You're just letting the dice dictate the story. Mm-hmm. Because if it was left up to you, you'd be like, this is going to be an epic battle. And the players are going to barely scrape by, like they always do.
Bad guy is going to have the last laugh before they are victoriously vanquished. And in the last moment, everyone else is down except for one person, and he gets the last strike.
Try it. Just try it out one session. Roll your dice in front of the Dungeon Master screen. I hear you asking through the screen, all right, you guys just got done talking about how amazing the Dungeon Master screen is, but you're not even going to roll behind it? Yeah. Isn't that like the primary reason why this thing is here?
It's not one thing or the other. Just because the DM screen is up does not mean we can't roll in front of it. We don't have to remove this to be able to roll in front of players and have everyone see it. This is pretty much how we play. We have a DM screen. We hide everything. We hide all our secrets and all our notes. And all of the important rolls that happen against players are done on a dice tray right in front of the screen for all the players to see. We can have the best of both. The mastery of this is knowing what checks to throw out in front of the players and knowing what to continue roll behind the screen. In front of the DM screen, I roll things like monster attacks and monster saves, things that are against the player.
There are some contested ones that I will roll out in front of them. For example, if you're trying to grapple someone.
Yes, the physical ones.
Yes, you'll know what's happening. If it makes sense for the players to be like, yeah, I would know if I grappled this guy or not.
You can obviously see something that's happening in front of you.
Yep.
But if it ever comes into question that the player might not know these specific things right off the bat, like how stealthy a creature is, or like a player's passive perception, if they're not specifically saying they're searching for something.
Yep.
You're going to be rolling for some of those things behind the screen. As a dungeon master, if you have questions to yourself, like can the ogre hear the party coming through the dungeon after slamming down a rotted door?
Yeah, so anything that could be construed almost as your monster action abilities are typically rolled behind the screen. If you know that there's a monster hidden out there and he's trying to perceive what the party is doing, they don't have to be D20 rolls. You could take 2d6, take that result, times it by 10. That's how many feet the monster can hear. Like, that's how loud the party's being. So you roll that, you're like, all right, you rolled 6 times 10. 60 feet away is how far the ogre can hear. So then you're like, all right, he's within 60 feet. I'm going to start rolling for perception. And I'm going to roll at advantage because it's coming down this tunnel that's acting as an amplifier.
And if you're doing all this behind the screen, the players just see you rolling and rolling random things and maybe writing things down. And those the things that are happening behind the scenes, and it builds that excitement.
But you're not fudging these rolls either. You have to accept the results. If that ogre is there and you're like, yeah, this guy's going to see what's happening with them, and he starts rolling ones.
He doesn't.
He doesn't. You have to give in to that. Again, let yourself be tamed by the dice. That is how the emergent story play happens at your tables, where you're like, all right, I put the playing pieces out. I set up the encounters. I'm not railroading it. I don't have any idea how any of this stuff is going to go. And that is when you start having those really wonderful, evocative games, because you're experiencing things for the first time with your players because you didn't know what was going to happen. So it makes it just as much fun for the DM as it does for the players.
The rolls are surprising you.
Yes.
And be true to yourself and don't go against what you see.
Yep.
Behind the screen, rolling for things happening behind the scenes.
Good dungeon masters will be able to be like, all right, how does that die roll create fiction in the story right now? And you start telling the story in your own head. You're like, all right, well, that ogre might be relieving himself right now. He's going to the bathroom.
Yeah, he's on a haunch of meat, and he's really
sure
distracted right now.
So now you have a distracted ogre, which now gives your party a chance to maybe sneak up on them, which you didn't think of before. There are things that you can roll behind the screen that are not monster related. I don't recommend every DM do this. I don't even do it myself some of the times. If there are instances where your players shouldn't know if something is happening to them or not, you might want to try rolling for your players behind the screen. I know a lot of players don't tense up. I know a lot of players don't like that. Realistically, if the rogue is trying to hide and be stealthy, they wouldn't know if they screwed up. Rogue, give me your stats for stealth. You roll it behind the screen and you narrate what happens. Sure, yeah, you think you're hidden. Only time I would tell them that they probably screwed up was if I rolled a 1 back here and I'm like, all right, you trip over and knock over that entire suit of armor display and it makes this terrible clanging. But for the most part, that rogue has to just be like, all right, I think I'm hidden. You're trying to be as immersive as possible. So if you think these things are going to make your games more mysterious, more immersive for you and your players, have that conversation beforehand and be like, hey guys, I want to try rolling a few of the player roles behind the screen. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
See how it goes.
Try it.
You don't have to be married to it. If everyone hates it after one session, ditch it. Another interesting tip that you can have back here is keep track of your players' hit points, their armor classes, their passive perceptions. Have them on a note card. Have them on a little index card or something.
Or some vulnerabilities and resistances that players have.
Sure, you want to start to stay on top of that, because what's going to end up, people are going to say, like, oh, that's cheating, but what's going to end up happening is that you're going to forget about this stuff.
You can't possibly remember every skill and ability and strength and weakness that every player has.
It's 5 of their brains versus your 1 overworked little lich noodle. Yeah. And they're going to outsmart you almost every single time. So anything you can do to give yourself a little bit of an advantage back here, keep it tucked away. Little gadget, little thing to hide behind here is an hourglass.
Oh, I love hourglasses.
You love hourglasses. When players are indecisive for the 12th time this session, and you're just sick and fed up, you just put out the hourglass.
That's so great. And like, don't say anything when you put it out so that one of the players sees it and they're like, guys.
Yeah. You should always have behind your DM screen a random list of names for various different races, so that when your players inevitably come up to this baker that bumps into them, and
George.
he's a halfling, and you can just be like, all right, yep. You mark off which one he is. Always have random names. Hide a speaker somewhere in your room, and then you have your little iPad or your phone behind your screen, and when something happens, you can have a little sting, or some music plays when they enter the tavern or the wizard's tower.
Those horror knife streaks.
Yeah, you can get theatrical with it. Never be caught off guard. Have everything you think you're going to need behind this screen. You never want your players to think that you weren't prepared for something. You always have a plan.
Yeah.
You were, obviously I was prepared for this. Always want to have confidence, and you always want to be able to just roll with what is happening. And having this DM screen, sort of like being a duck on a pond. Like they see, it's all confidence.
All above water.
And it's fine.
Yeah.
But below, down here, it's like, I have to poo. And my little duck feet are wiggling all sorts of ways.
All those things that you've prepared and that are behind the Dungeon Master screen, your players should never catch a glimpse of what's back here.
Never discuss after the session, be like, you guys went there, I rolled a couple dice, and you were this close to finding the secret door or something. Never do that.
God, are you going to start ruining that curtain of illusion and puppet mastery for players?
When done correctly, an excellent session of Dungeons and Dragons or any tabletop role-playing game, you're almost like an oracle or a shaman, and you're casting the bones secretly behind the screens or in front of the screen, and you're sort of scrying the results, and you're just pulling this crazy story out of the ether. And your players are almost spellbound by it. When it's going well, that's how it feels.
Once you start realizing that the bad rolls are just as good as the good rolls in the storytelling.
Yes.
And that there is no difference. You don't have to be wary of failure from the players or yourself.
Because players are always going to surprise you, and when you start throwing complications and consequences at them, they're going to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they're going to surprise you, and they're going to grip and claw their way back from the depths. And that is what's going to create these heroic moments and these amazing stories at the table. Trust that the dice gods are always going to answer your calls. Trust the dice god. The Dungeon Master screen is equal parts bag of holding and grocery list of shit you always forget.
For us, the importance just outweighs the factors of having it down. And some tables prefer that equal playing field. There is no division between DM and PC, and that's how they play, and, that's perfectly fine.
Perfectly fine. Your table, your fun. Do you. Here's my final pitch for using a DM screen. Dungeon Masters are not adversarial. We're not your enemies. But it is human nature for the people on the other side of the DM screen to want to beat you.
Yeah, I feel like it's war.
They want to destroy your monsters, foil your plans, undo your traps, kill your henchmen, slay the bad guy, and they will relish this. They will throw it in your face when they tear through all of your ideas.
And just smile and nod. I'm happy with them when they defeat my creatures.
Of course, the Dungeon Master is the biggest fan of the player characters. You are rooting for them to succeed.
And I'll kind of do a tongue-in-cheek, good job.
Play it up.
So pretend that I feel a little defeated.
Yes, do that. Be like, oh, you guys killed all my monsters. But you know the real truth that behind the screen, behind the scenes, you're doing everything in your power just to make sure that your friends are having a great time. You're going to try to stay cool. This is going to help you keep your cool.
And this is going to help you build trust.
And you're going to always seem like you're 4 or 5 steps ahead of what your players are thinking and what they're doing. And they're always going to be like, man, Kmo is the best Dungeon Master I've ever played with. He just goes with all of our crazy stuff. Or Wolf is amazing. We went off and did these insane adventures. There's no way he could have possibly planned for that. And you're right, I may not have. I just rolled with it. I had some stuff back here that helped me keep up with the players. Because that's really all you're doing, is you're just trying to keep up with the players. Because they're going to go off in directions and do things that drive you insane. Keep it cool. Use the Dungeon Master screen.
And that's it, Liches. We love the DM screen. We are hybrid DM screen users where we roll in front of our screen, but we still keep it. It can be done. Crazy, right?
It is not just about fudging die rolls. It's so much more than that.
Your world exists behind this screen, and your players are always going to be wondering what's next.
Let us know in the comments, what are your best tips and tricks? What are you rolling behind this DM screen? What are some of your most fun hidden rolls that you do? We want to know. We want to get better as Dungeon Masters. We know you guys out there are doing crazy, awesome stuff. Hit us up. If you're interested in learning about a Dungeon Master screen, we have already reviewed one of the official Dungeon Kit Dungeon Master screens for 5th edition. We got a video for you right here. Check it out.
Please subscribe, Toll the Dead, and we'll catch you next time. Join the Legion. We're over 1,000 now. Let's keep it going. Later, Liches.
Bye-bye.